Mirabel Selwick didn't know the man in the corner was a king. She didn't know his name, his title, or the fact that 6 armed guards were positioned at various points throughout the inn disguised as merchants and travelers. She didn't know that the reason every instinct in her body had been screaming at her to look at him since she walked through the door had nothing to do with how handsome he was, though he was, devastatingly so, and everything to do with a bond that had been waiting her entire life to snap into place. What she knew was this: the venison stew was excellent, the fire was warm, and her 2 best friends had not stopped talking about him for the last 20 minutes. "Don't look now," Petra whispered, leaning across the table with the subtlety of a barn collapsing. "He's doing it again." "Doing what?" Mirabel tore a piece of bread from the loaf between them and dipped it in her stew. "Looking at you." Mirabel did not look. She had been very deliberately not looking since they'd arrived at the Crossed Antlers Inn an hour ago, road-weary and smelling of beeswax and tallow from the 3 crates of candles loaded in the wagon outside. They were halfway through a 2-day trade run to the eastern market towns, the same route Mirabel made every season, and this inn was their usual overnight stop. Warm beds, good food, a stable master who didn't overcharge. What was not usual was the man sitting alone at a table in the far corner near the stairs. She'd caught one glimpse when they walked in. One. It had been enough. Tawny brown hair cut to his jawline and tucked behind one ear. A face that was all sharp planes and quiet intensity. The kind of face that looked like it had been designed to make women forget how to form sentences. He wore a dark green long coat with the sleeves pushed back to his forearms, simple but beautifully made, and he sat with the easy stillness of someone who was used to being the most dangerous person in any room and saw no need to prove it. One glimpse. Then Mirabel had looked at the floor and walked to the farthest table and told herself very firmly that men who looked like that did not end up in crossroads inns on trade routes, and if they did, they certainly didn't look twice at women with wax under their fingernails and road dust in their hair. "He is absolutely staring," said Joran, Petra's husband, who had the good sense to keep his voice lower than his wife. "Mira, I'm not joking. The man has been watching you since you sat down. He's probably watching all of us. We're loud." "We are not loud." Petra paused. "All right, I'm loud. But he's not looking at me. He's looking at you." Mirabel ate her bread. The stew was genuinely excellent, rich and dark with rosemary and root vegetables, and she wanted to enjoy it without developing some absurd fantasy about a stranger in a corner who was almost certainly waiting for someone more interesting to arrive. But something was happening that she couldn't explain. Something underneath the warmth of the fire and the heaviness of the meal and the familiar comfort of Petra's chatter. A scent. Faint at first, woven through the smoke and roasting meat and old wood of the inn, but growing steadily stronger with every minute she sat here. Cedar, deep and clean and resinous, and beneath it something cooler. Rain. Not the memory of rain, but the living scent of it. The way the air smelled in the seconds before a storm broke. Electric and full. She'd never smelled anything like it. Not here. Not anywhere. She breathed it in and felt something in her chest expand, like a fist unclenching that she hadn't known was clenched. "Mirabel." Petra's voice had changed. Lost the teasing edge. Gone careful. "He's getting up." Mirabel's hand tightened on her bread. "He's walking this way." "Petra, stop." "I am telling you, he is walking directly toward this table and I need you to put down the bread because you have stew on your chin." Mirabel wiped her chin with the back of her hand and looked up. He was right there, standing at the edge of their table with his hands at his sides, and those eyes, gods above, those eyes, dark moss green like the deep woods after rain, and the cedar scent hit her so hard her vision blurred. Not unpleasant, overwhelming, like standing in a grove of ancient trees and breathing in the whole forest at once. "Forgive the interruption." His voice was low, unhurried, a voice that expected to be listened to without needing to be loud. "I noticed your wagon outside. The crates are stamped with a chandler's mark from Brindlewood." Mirabel stared at him. Up close, the sharp planes of his face softened slightly around the mouth. There was a faint scar along his jaw, thin and pale, half hidden by the way his hair fell. His sleeves were pushed back, and the forearms beneath were corded with lean muscle. "That's my mark," she heard herself say. "Selwick Chandlery." Something shifted in his expression, subtle, a flicker in those moss-green depths that she couldn't read. "I've been looking for quality tapers for a keep in the northern ranges. The local suppliers can't manage the altitude. The wax sweats and the wicks drown." "Beeswax blend with a touch of bayberry for high altitude," Mirabel said automatically. "Double-braided cotton wick, trimmed long. The issue isn't the wax, it's the wick. Most chandlers use single braid and it can't sustain the draw at elevation." He looked at her for a beat too long. "You know your craft." "I should. I've been doing it since I was 9. Petra kicked her under the table. Mirabel ignored it. "May I sit?" He gestured to the empty space on the bench beside Jorin. Not beside her. Beside her friend's husband. Respectful. Deliberate. Jorin looked at Mirabel. Mirabel looked at the stranger. The cedar scent was so strong now that she could feel it like a physical thing, warm against her skin, settling into the spaces between her ribs. "All right," she said. He sat. He did not extend his hand or offer his name immediately, which struck her as odd. Instead, he asked her about altitude-resistant candle formulations, and she answered. And somehow 20 minutes passed in which Mirabel Selwick forgot to be self-conscious about the wax stains on her sleeves and the road dust in her ink-black hair because the man across the table was asking genuinely intelligent questions about wick braiding techniques and burn rates, and the difference between rendered tallow and pressed beeswax. He told her his name was Lucian. Just Lucian. He told her he was traveling north with a small company. He told her he managed a large estate and was looking to secure a standing order for quality lighting, something that wouldn't gutter out in drafts or melt in storage. He did not tell her that the estate was a palace. He did not tell her that the small company included 6 disguised members of the royal guard. He did not tell her that he was Lucian Kestwick, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, traveling the trade roads to inspect border conditions without the spectacle of a royal procession. What he did tell her, just before the conversation wound down, and Petra yawned theatrically enough to rattle the cutlery, was this. "You smell like honey." He said it quietly, almost to himself, as though the words had escaped without permission. Mirabel's heart slammed once, hard against her sternum. "It's the beeswax. It gets into everything. My hair, my clothes, my skin, probably." "No." His moss-green eyes held hers, and something in them burned, low and steady, like embers banked beneath ash. "Not beeswax. Honey, like sunlight caught in a jar." He paused. His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry. That was forward." "It was," Mirabel agreed. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "But I won't hold it against you, since you smell like a cedar forest in the rain, and I've been trying to figure out why for the last hour." He went very still. The kind of still that had nothing to do with calm and everything to do with control. His pupils dilated. She watched it happen, the moss green of his eyes darkening, narrowing to rings around something vast and intent. "You can smell it," he said, not a question. "Is that not normal?" "No." His voice had dropped, rough at the edges. "That is not normal." Mirabel looked at Petra, who was watching this exchange with her mouth slightly open. Jorin had the expression of a man who had just realized the room had shifted around him in a direction he hadn't anticipated. I should let you rest, Lucian said. He stood from the bench in one fluid motion. Will you be here in the morning? We leave at dawn. Then I'll find you at dawn. He held her gaze one more moment. Sleep well, Mirabel. He said her name like it was something he'd been practicing, like it mattered. She did not sleep well. She lay in the narrow bed in the room above the common hall and stared at the ceiling and breathed in the cedar scent that still clung to her skin from sitting 3 feet away from him. And she thought about the way he'd looked at her when she told him she could smell it too. Like something in him had cracked open. Like something enormous and terrifying had just become real. The scent faded as the hours passed. Not completely. A whisper of it remained. Like the last trace of wood smoke after a fire goes cold. And in its absence, Mirabel felt the lack. A hollowness beneath her ribs that hadn't been there before. As though something essential had been removed and the space it left was aching. She came downstairs at dawn to find him already in the courtyard. He was leaning against the stone wall near the stable doors with his arms crossed, and the moment she stepped outside, the cedar hit her like a wave, stronger than the night before, and the hollowness vanished, filled with warmth and the scent of rain on green wood. His eyes found hers, and she saw the relief in them before he could hide it. You feel it too, she said, when I'm not close. The emptiness. He pushed off the wall, walked toward her, stopped at a distance that was respectable but close enough that the scent wrapped around them both like a living thing. Since last night, I couldn't sleep. Neither could I. They stood in the gray morning light, the courtyard quiet, the horses shifting in the stable behind the wall, and looked at each other with the bewildered honesty of 2 people who had been struck by something neither of them understood. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you respond. The door of the inn swung open behind them. A woman walked out, tall, immaculately dressed in a traveling gown of deep burgundy with gold embroidery at the cuffs and collar. Her hair was pale gold, swept up in an elaborate arrangement that had no business being on anyone's head at dawn on a trade road. Her eyes were sharp and tawny gold, and they swept from Lucian to Mirabel and back with the precise cataloging assessment of someone tallying up a ledger and finding it short. Your Majesty. The woman dipped into a curtsy that managed to be both graceful and pointed. I've been looking for you since the evening meal. Your guard said you were occupied. The courtyard went very quiet. Mirabel looked at Lucian. Your Majesty? His jaw tightened. Something flickered across his face that might have been frustration or resignation or both. Lady Pelham, I wasn't aware you were staying at this inn. Fortunate timing. Taryn Pelham smiled. It was the kind of smile that had edges. I was en route to Kestwick Hall for the season. My father arranged my presentation to the court. Her tawny eyes slid to Mirabel, took in the wax-stained sleeves, the road-dusted boots, the ink-black hair still tangled from a restless night. I see you've been passing the time. Mirabel felt the words land like a stone dropped into still water. She looked at Lucian, and the cedar scent was still there, still warm, still wrapping around her like it knew her, but the word Majesty was ringing in her skull like a bell. You're the king, she said flatly. Lucian's moss-green eyes held hers. That's what I was about to tell you. Before or after you asked about my wick-braiding techniques? The corner of his mouth twitched. Just barely. After. Definitely after. Taryn Pelham stepped between them with the practiced ease of a woman who had been inserting herself into conversations her whole life. Your Majesty, the road north is long, and I'd welcome the company of your party. Perhaps we could discuss the arrangements my father outlined in his letter. There are no arrangements, Lady Pelham. Lucian's voice didn't change in volume. It changed in texture. Went flat and cool. A king's voice, stripped of the warmth Mirabel had heard the night before. Your father's letter requested a court presentation. It was neither accepted nor declined. Those are separate matters. Taryn's smile hardened. Of course. Her gaze swept to Mirabel one more time, dismissive and thorough. Enjoy the rest of your trade run. She walked back into the inn. The door closed behind her. Mirabel stood in the courtyard with cedar and rain flooding her senses and a hollow ringing in her chest that had nothing to do with the bond and everything to do with the realization that she had spent last night lying awake thinking about a man who ruled a territory, and she was a woman who made candles. Mirabel? I should check my wagon. Mirabel, look at me. She looked at him. The moss-green eyes were raw, unguarded in a way that made her breath catch because kings did not look like that. Kings did not stand in dirty courtyards at dawn with their hair uncombed and their sleeves still pushed back and look at a candlemaker like she was the only real thing in the world. I didn't tell you because I wanted one conversation in which someone talked to me like a person, he said. You talked about wicks and burn rates, and you argued with me about bayberry ratios, and it was the best conversation I've had in months. I wasn't ready to lose that. You're a king. I'm aware. I have wax under my fingernails. He reached out and took her hand, turned it over, looked at her fingers with their short nails and their yellowish beeswax stains, and the small burn scar on her thumb from a spilled pour 3 years ago. The cedar scent intensified at the contact point, blooming up from where his skin touched hers, and Mirabel felt warmth rush through her like summer through a window thrown open. These hands, he said quietly, are the hands of someone who builds something real, every day, with skill and patience and knowledge that took years to earn. He didn't let go. Don't you dare apologize for that. Her throat tightened. She didn't pull away. The morning unraveled from there in a way Mirabel could not have predicted. Lucian asked if she would ride with his company north, at least as far as the eastern crossroads where their routes diverged. She said no. He asked again. She said no again. He asked if she would at least allow him to ride alongside her wagon, since they were heading in the same direction anyway, and it would be inefficient to travel separately. Petra, who had been listening from the stable doorway, said yes before Mirabel could say no a third time. They rode together through the morning, the forest pressed close to the road, dappled green and gold, the canopy filtering the light into shifting patterns across the packed earth. Lucian rode a dark bay stallion that moved like water. He rode beside the wagon and talked to Mirabel through the open side while Petra drove and Joran dozed against the candle crates. He asked about her childhood. She told him about growing up in her grandmother's chandlery in Brindlewood, learning to dip tapers before she could read, the way the whole house smelled of honey and hot wax. He asked about her parents. She told him her mother left when she was 4, and her father was a good man who worked the timber yards and came home every evening smelling of pine sap and sweat. He'd raised her with patience and steadiness, and had never once made her feel like she wasn't enough. Is that why you don't believe it? Lucian asked. That I'm here? That this is real? Mirabel looked at him. The forest light caught the tawny brown of his hair and turned it to something warm, almost golden, and his eyes were soft in a way that made her chest ache. I believe you're here, she said. I believe something is happening between us that I don't understand. I believe you smell like the best thing I've ever breathed in, and it terrifies me. Why terrifying? Because you're a king, and I'm a candlemaker. And in the stories, those don't end well for the candlemaker. He was quiet for a long time. The horse's hooves marked a steady rhythm on the road. This isn't a story, he said. And you are not a background character in mine. They stopped at midday where a stream crossed the road. While Petra and Joran watered the horses, Mirabel sat on a fallen log near the water, and Lucian sat beside her, close enough that the scent was a living warmth between them, cedar and honey intertwined, and she could feel the bond humming in her chest like a second heartbeat. I've read about this, he said. The scent bond. It's the rarest manifestation. It means the recognition goes deeper than sight or touch, down to something chemical, primal. The body knows before the mind catches up. My body apparently knew the minute I walked into that inn. Mine knew before that. He looked at the stream. The water ran clear over smooth stones. I smelled honey on the road, half a mile before the inn. I thought I was imagining it. Then your wagon came around the bend and the scent hit me so hard I nearly fell off my horse. Mirabel laughed. A real laugh, sudden and startled, and Lucian looked at her with an expression that cracked something inside her chest. Wonder. Simple, unguarded wonder, as though the sound of her laughing was something he wanted to hear for the rest of his life. She kissed him. Not planned, not graceful. She turned toward him on the log and put her hands on either side of his face and kissed him, and the cedar and honey surged between them like a wave breaking, and his hands came up to her waist and pulled her closer with a gentleness that contradicted the hunger she could feel, trembling through him. And for one perfect suspended moment, the whole forest went silent around them. When she pulled back, his eyes were closed. His hands were still on her waist. The moss green, when he opened his eyes, was nearly black with intensity. I was supposed to tell you about the bond first, he murmured. I had a whole explanation prepared. You can explain later. Mirabel. He said her name like a vow. I need you to understand that this isn't casual for me. This isn't a passing interest in a woman I met at an inn. The scent bond means something specific in our world. It means you are mine and I am yours, and that has been true since before either of us was born. That's a lot to put on a woman before lunch. He laughed. Low and warm and real, the first time she'd heard him laugh, and it did things to her stomach that had nothing to do with the venison stew. The eastern crossroads arrived too soon. Mirabel's route curved south toward the market towns. Lucian's continued north to the mountains and a palace she had never seen, and a life so far removed from hers that the distance felt like a physical wound. They stood at the fork in the road. Petra and Joran had positioned themselves a tactful 50 paces down the south road. Lucian's guards waited at an equal distance to the north, pretending to check their horses' tack. Come with me, Lucian said. Not as an obligation, not as a command, as a question from a man who found you at a crossroads and doesn't know how to walk away. I have candle deliveries. Petra can manage them. My shop will still be there. My life, Lucian. My whole life is in Brindlewood. He took her hand again. The scent bloomed. Cedar and honey twined together like they were the same thing, like they had always been the same thing, and Mirabel felt the bond hum between them so strongly that her vision blurred. Then I'll come to Brindlewood, he said. I'll sleep above a candle shop and eat bread from the bakery on the corner and learn to trim wicks. I don't care where we are, Mirabel. I care that we're in the same place. She stared at him. You're a king. I am aware that I'm a king. I have been a king for 6 years, and in that entire time, no one has argued with me about bayberry ratios, or told me my candle suppliers were incompetent to my face, or made me laugh so hard I forgot to be careful. His thumb traced a circle on the back of her hand. Come north with me, just for a fortnight. See the keep. Let me show you the hall that needs better lighting, and if you hate it, I will personally drive your wagon back to Brindlewood and never mention it again. You're lying. You would mention it constantly. I would mention it constantly, he agreed, but I would do it from Brindlewood. They arrived at Kestwick Hall 3 days later. Mirabel had expected the palace to make her feel small. It did the opposite. The keep was ancient, built into the mountainside, all dark stone and soaring windows and fireplaces wide enough to stand in. But it was also cold. Not just in temperature, in light. The candles were terrible. Cheap tallow tapers that guttered in the drafts and threw a sickly yellow glow that turned every room into something grim. You weren't exaggerating about the lighting, Mirabel said, holding up one of the tapers and watching it drip pathetically. I never exaggerate. You told me you had a small estate. I said large. I specifically said large. You implied a country house? This is a mountain fortress with 17 fireplaces. 19. She looked at him. He looked at her. The cedar scent was everywhere in this hall, soaked into the stone walls and the heavy curtains and the worn rugs. And she realized with a start that it wasn't just him. It was his home. The whole place smelled like him, and standing in it felt like standing inside the bond itself. The fortnight was barely 3 days old when Lady Taryn Pelham arrived at the palace with a traveling trunk, 2 attendants, and a smile that could cut glass. Mirabel first encountered her in the great hall during the evening meal. Taryn swept in wearing a gown of midnight blue with gold threading at the bodice, and took a seat at the high table as though a place had been set for her personally, which it hadn't, and proceeded to hold court with every noble in attendance. When she spotted Mirabel, seated beside Lucian, she smiled. The candlemaker. How charming. I didn't realize the king's supplier sat at the high table. The hall went quiet. Mirabel felt the words like a slap, precise and public, designed to land exactly where they would bruise. But before she could respond, Lucian set down his cup. The sound was quiet. The silence that followed it was not. Lady Pelham. His voice carried the way a king's voice carries, without effort, filling every corner of the hall. Mirabel Selwick sits at this table because I asked her to. She sits at my right because that is where she belongs. And if you address her with anything less than the respect you would show to me, you will find that your visit to Kestwick Hall ends considerably sooner than you planned. Taryn's smile didn't falter, but something behind it cracked. Your Majesty, I meant no offense. I was merely surprised. Then let me remove the surprise. Lucian didn't stand, didn't raise his voice. His moss-green eyes held Taryn's with a stillness that was more threatening than any shout. This woman is my mate, recognized by a scent bond so strong it carried half a mile on a trade road before I ever saw her face. She is not a curiosity. She is not a passing amusement. She is the reason this hall will be lit properly for the first time in a century, and she is the reason I intend to be a better king than I was before I met her. He paused. Let the silence work. Is there anything else you're surprised about? Taryn Pelham left Kestwick Hall the following morning. Her trunk was loaded before sunrise. Her curtsy to Lucian in the courtyard was rigid, correct, and final. She did not look at Mirabel. Mirabel stood beside Lucian and watched the carriage disappear down the mountain road, and the scent between them pulsed, cedar and honey, warm and strong and undeniable. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. You called me your mate in front of the entire court. I called you my mate because you are my mate. He turned to face her, reached up and tucked a strand of ink-black hair behind her ear, and the place where his fingertip touched her skin left a trail of warmth that sank to her bones. Was I wrong? She looked up at him. The mountain air was cold against her cheeks, and the courtyard was empty except for the two of them, and the scent was everywhere, so strong she could taste it, cedar on her tongue and honey on his, and the bond between them hummed like a plucked string. You weren't wrong, she said. He kissed her forehead, then her temple, then the corner of her mouth, gentle and deliberate and aching with restraint. Stay, he murmured against her skin. I already was. 2 months later, the chandlery at Kestwick Hall occupied a converted workshop on the ground floor of the east wing, positioned where the morning light came through a row of tall windows and warmed the wax to the perfect working temperature. Mirabel had designed it herself, 3 long tables for dipping, a wall of shelves holding molds and wick spools and jars of pigment, a stone hearth for melting. The whole room smelled of beeswax and honey and, underneath it, cedar. She was testing a new blend that morning, a beeswax taper infused with juniper oil for the audience chambers, when Lucian appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame and crossed his arms and watched her the way he always watched her, as though she was doing something miraculous instead of dipping cotton string into hot wax. "The eastern corridor lights are burning 12 hours without trimming," she said, without looking up. "I told you the double-braided wick would solve it." "You told me." "I doubted you. I was wrong. This is becoming a pattern." She looked at him. He was smiling. The real smile. The one that softened the sharp planes of his face and made his moss-green eyes go warm and open. The one he only wore for her. "Petra sent a letter," Mirabel said. "The market run went well. She sold out of the honey tapers by midday. She could sell sand to a desert. She says the same about you." Mirabel set down her dipping rod. "She also says the whole town is talking about the king who rides down from the mountains every third week to sleep above a candle shop." "I don't sleep above the candle shop anymore. I convinced the chandler to move in with me." "You bribed the chandler with a workshop and unlimited beeswax. And it worked." She crossed the room to him, stood in front of him in the doorway with wax drying on her fingers and juniper oil on her apron and her ink-black hair twisted up with a wooden pin, and the scent rose between them the way it always did. Cedar and honey, strong and sure. A thing that had been true since before either of them was born, and would be true long after the candles burned down. He unfolded his arms, pulled her in, pressed his mouth against her hair and breathed her in, and she felt his chest expand with it, the fullness of it, the recognition that never faded, never diminished, only deepened with every hour they shared. "Mirabel," he said against her hair. "Lucian, your friends were wrong, you know." She pulled back to look at him. "About what?" "That night at the inn." His thumb traced her jaw. His moss-green eyes held hers with a steadiness that made her heart turn over. "He's out of your league," they said. "They had it backwards." "You were always out of mine." She laughed. He kissed her. The candles burned on the table behind them, steady and bright. The best light Kestwick Hall had ever known.